Really nice to see you all. Delighted to welcome you to this session today. I'm really keen looking at this session. We have thought about what we want to talk about, and we have a range of incredibly smart people here to go through a really fascinating topic. And this idea of evaluation, measurement, and so on is something that we have a problem with in a lot of learning and development for some reason. I don't quite know why. It's evaluation strategies and learning initiatives. That's what we're looking at today. What I would like to do before we start is just to find out where you're all dialing in from. So in the chat, if you can just say where you're dialing in from today and what the weather's like where you are. I'm in East London and it's bright and sunny. It's very, very nice weather here today. I've got to go out on my bike in a little while, but please, in the chat, just tell us, oh, you're in East London as well, Neil. Awesome.
I am, yes.
Awesome. Johannesburg and Lagos, we're having a look and seeing we are diverse audience, so please tell us who we have and where you're from and where you're coming from today. My name's Andrew Jacobs. I'm an independent learning consultant. I'm hosting the session today. Yes, he has a big microphone. That's because I do lots of podcast stuff. So I have a big microphone and I also have a voice for podcasting. This is why I think that I was asked to help host the session today. Nice to see where we've got Milton Keynes and we've got Mek Bostrand. I think that is a listener. And Nigeria again, and Cape Town, and oh wow, a real mix of people. Lincoln, I like Lincoln. It's a very, very high hill to run up in the middle in the early morning, though. But nice to see everybody, giving people just a chance for more people to join in the room. This is why I'm just killing time. What I'd like to do is introduce our panel to you, first of all. So what I'd like to do is, as I've got them on my screen in front of me, so let's come to Emma first. So if you would like to tell us who you are, Emma, where you're from, and why are you here today?
Thank you, Andrew. Good to be here. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. So I'm Emma. I've been in learning and development for 23 years, which is definitely showing my age a bit now. I've got a background in corporate and vendor settings. On the corporate side, I started my career at Virgin Atlantic and spent 4 years there, both in the UK and in the US. After that, I took a challenge, took a leap, and took on a role as a learning and development manager for a small manufacturing company still in the States. Had a complete clean sheet to work with, which is really exciting. So got the LMS going, the big challenge that most of us have to deal with, some learning strategy, onboarding, the whole shebang. It's good fun. And then after about 10 years in corporate learning, I was lured over to the vendor side. Started with a company called the Centre for Leadership Studies, who was sort of famous for situational leadership, and they're kind of the co-founders of that model. Did that for about 3 years in their custom learning side, working mostly with clients on sales training, leadership training. And then in 2016, I sort of found my current home, which is a company called SweetRush, who are a custom learning vendor, also based in the US. I'm back in the UK. Half my time there, still in instructional design, working as a learning experience designer on client projects, and then more recently moved into the marketing team, weirdly, but as a learning evangelist, where I now write articles, blogs, ebooks on the industry and best practices. But why I'm here today is that the work I've been doing most recently is around learning awards, actually, and helping our clients apply for a learning awards, and I'm also judging quite a few learning awards programs now, and evaluation is so critical to that piece. It's critical anyway, but it can make the difference between winning, not winning, gold, silver, bronze. So it's been really interesting now to look at it from that perspective. So happy to be here and to share what I can and learn from you all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. Let's go to Neha. Neha's next on my list. Neha, you're on the panel today. Who you are? It's like game show, isn't it? What's your name and where do you come from? tell us about yourself. Why you're here?
Is it?
Yeah, why are you here today?
Sure. Thank you. And hi, I'm Neha Laguratnakar, and I'm here because, in short, Oyinda Mola inspired me tremendously, and I couldn't say no to her. I actually have a master's in organizational psychology and a CPTD. I've written 2 books, actually, one on career restarter career restart called Back on Your Feet. And I've also co-authored one for Association of Talent Development, which is more for all of you, which is for L&D and OD people. Apart from that, I've worked in L&D for almost 12 years now in 8 countries across the world. I work days as a fractional L&D advisor. And I also speak at conferences on the topic that is very close to my heart. I'm here today because measuring learning has always been something of a lot of interest for me. I had a lot of curiosity. I tested lots of things, failed in several things, some things worked out. So all this experimentation is what I bring to all of you today in lots of different industries, but primarily in retail, FMCG, hospitality, because that's where my career has been most of the time. And these days I work with all sorts of different clients and I continue to explore these new ways. So I hope you can learn something from my insights and also from my mistakes that I've made over my career. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Neha. Next on my list. Keep moving these screens about for me. Lanry, let's come to you, Lanry. You're next on my screen that I've got.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Please confirm you can hear me loud and clear.
Perfectly.
The full name is Orlando Waju Ochulo, but I preferred to be called Larry. I've been in the industry for over a decade now, and before going into a specialist role, I have been a generalist. I have worked across several industries. I've been in the consulting industry. I've been in insurance. I've been in oil and gas here in Nigeria. And some of the organizations that I worked with across Africa, Europe, and Asia. At the same time, I want to say the reason why I'm here is because I want to make contributions to strategies that I've used before that has worked for me as a learning practitioner. Before I ventured into a specialist role, I've been a generalist, so I understand what it means to drive business performance through people. And that's essentially what I'm here to do, to encourage some of my colleagues who are finding it difficult now to evaluate their learning initiatives, what I've done across different industry on ways you can evaluate, not only as a learner and development person. I have been an HR person. I've practiced HR thoroughly, talking about all the value chains. I've handled them. So I have a deeper understanding of how to drive performance through learning. So for me, learning is not just learning that we should do. Learning should be an enabler for organizational performance. And that's the essential part of the conversation today. So I look forward to an interesting conversation with you and other panelists. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lanry. And last but not least, let's come to Neil. Neil, what's your name and where do you come from? I know you're in East London.
Yeah, my name's Neil and I'm in East London. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you everyone for attending today. I'm particularly passionate about this topic because I actually started out in sales. Was my first career, which is very much proving your value through a simple metric of selling something and bringing in cash. And while I was in this sales role, we were hiring like 20 new salespeople at a time, and they were all being lost. People weren't sticking around with the business, and it was a bit cultural and it was a bit learning. And so I said to the directors, can I take over training these people? And what we saw was that if we could isolate a small group and give them a set of learning that was driven, as Lana was saying, through performance, and then put them into a management team that were culturally set to support them, all of a sudden the attrition dropped within these new starters. And I could at first I didn't realize I was doing this at the time, by the way. I was trying to make it up as I was going along. I was making these causal links between learning and ROI. And then eventually, as I got the opportunity to work for different consultancies and big companies like HP and then small startups, we have to do everything on a shoestring, it all became about how do we prove the value of L&D, right through from satisfaction, because that is what some leaders care about, right through to the ROI. And today I'm the founder and L&D solutions director at a consultancy called Align, Learn, Do. And whether or not we're doing a custom built workshop or programs, whether or not we're helping a startup build its first L&D function, or an enterprise look at its offering and going, how can we improve this? We bring it back to our Align, Learn, Do model, and it's about how do we ensure that both people and the business can grow through learning. So that's why I'm really interested about the topic and why I've been very excited to be invited today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Neil. So, like I said, I've mentioned at the start that I had some questions and so on, but actually, this is a panel. So you've got 4 really smart people here, plus this bloke sitting here with a big microphone, who are quite happy to ask questions of. Now, what I'm really keen is to find out from you as an audience, what do you want to know from these people here? You've come to a session about evaluation. I'm assuming it's more than just what's a design of a good happy sheet look like. What we want to look is to dig through this. We've got people here who have an innate understanding of how to relate learning development activity to the performance. So I'm really keen to find out your questions. So please use the chat. Make sure you use the chat. We're not going to open mics up because it gets a little bit too noisy. But if you can put in the chat your questions that you've got for the panel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with one question, and then we'll wait and see what you've got to ask. And if need be, I've got some backup questions that we can go with as well. But what do you want to know from the panel today? So please make sure to start putting your questions in the chat. I am going to start with a question for the panel. So on my second screen. So I don't know who would like to have a go at this one first, but the question is quite simply, what does an effective evaluation strategy look like? Who wants to have a go at that one first?
I'll go if no one else wants to. Sorry, Naya, did you want to?
No, go ahead, Neil. You spoke up first. Go first.
Okay, sorry. I ponder this a lot because I think it's very different within each business, because you need to understand what the business values and your stakeholders value. But I think a good evaluation strategy actually just starts with learning design and your hypothesis, and understanding what you want to change through the learning, what skills you want people to acquire, or knowledge or behaviors. How are you then going to assess that, and how do you remove things like bias from the assessments to prove that people have acquired them? And then how do you link those to the performance improvements that you see because of this, and how do you ensure that other organizational design factors aren't affecting the performance as well? And then after that, can you get to from results to an ROI? And then if you've got an ROI, can you then say, is it causal, strongly causal, or is it causated? And if you can, how do you package that into a really compelling story that takes your stakeholders through an individual's journey through that? So how can you marry both the functional and the emotional together? I think that's where I'd start if I was thinking about an effective evaluation strategy.
Brilliant. Thanks, Neil. Neha.
Thanks, Neil. And I love that you gave a very high-level understanding of what the entire strategy would look like and what are the important things to keep in mind as you build one in L&D. And if I bring it down to a more micro level, from my experiences, if we can define what is the business value that you need to extract from the performer, whether it's efficiency, effectiveness, or being a better manager, better feedback giver, more psychological safety, whatever it is, the more clearly we can define the business value that you want to extract or get out of the intervention, the better we will be creating at evaluation strategy. I don't know how much time we have, but I can supplement that with a little story if you want.
Go ahead, Neha. Go ahead. You got the microphone.
Cool. So the experience that I have comes from hospitality and retail industry up close, but strangely not as an L&D expert, but from the point of view of an evaluator. So for years, I was a mystery shopper, and I used to work with companies, large companies like Marriott, Radisson's, Four Seasons, McDonald's, etc. And I used to evaluate what the service standards look like, which is a difficult thing to measure apart from how much time it takes for you to order a burger to how long it takes for the burger to get in your hands. That's an easy measure. So of course, I measured that. But there were many more criteria that we used to measure. So we talked about not just how much time lapsed between order and getting the food, but as soon as you interact with the person, the name of the staff, did they make eye contact, did they smile at you, did they greet you in a pleasant manner? Then once you receive the food, was the lettuce, tomato, and the patty in the right order? Was the mayonnaise coming out? Stuff like that. And once you bit into it, the temperature, the crispiness, the patty, the softness of the bread, etc. And I evaluated dozens of McDonald's in my career. And imagine thousands of such people doing it all over the world and millions of such evaluations. So of course, McDonald's decided to boil the ocean and get the big data on the whole thing. because that was the thing that was important for them. That was the business value. They wanted a customer to have exactly the same experience and same food taste, no matter what part of the world they are, right? So that was the business value they were trying to extract from the world. And once they had finalized that this is where we want to be, they designed the whole training around it and the whole evaluation package around it. But of course, you could be from a small business and you don't have to boil the ocean. You can come up with a simple business unit or a function or an activity where you can measure, this is the business value and this is what I want the trainee to be able to do or to be able to get to. And that's your primary goal with the strategy, and you build everything around that.
I think that's a really interesting point, Neha. I think because fast food, particularly, people recognize the brand. You recognize the McDonald's, the KFC, whatever, and you know what you're going to get when you go there. And so that need for uniformity more than consistency is really important. So it makes measuring from the learning perspective actually a little bit easier, because you can go directly through and you can say, well, let's do a direct comparison from here to here to here, which I think is really interesting. So you're exactly right there. Emma Lanry, I'm interested. What are your thoughts? What's an effective evaluation strategy look like?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Okay, I'll jump in. So for me, I mean, evaluation starts with needs analysis. And that's where I always get started. So really looking, and I'm kind of echoing what Neil and Neha have said already, but it starts with a business need, right? So what is the problem that learning is trying to solve? Quite often, stakeholders, your internal clients, external clients will come to you with a solution. We need training in this, right? Our sales team needs training in blank, or our leaders need training in blank. And so my sort of starting point is always, well, why? What will that do for you? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And what will happen if we don't solve it, right? Because that often helps you get to that problem a lot easier than asking what success looks like. And once you've got that and you know what success does look like, then you can start thinking about, okay, how will we know we've been successful? And what are those things that we need to measure? What are the things that we'll see or notice? What reports can we pull? And from there, then I go backwards another layer and, to what Neil was talking about, where we're looking at things like, okay, well, who is the audience? What are they currently doing? What should they be doing? How can they help drive those outcomes? What are the performance objectives? What are the non-objectives? Getting all that mapped out so that then you can figure out, okay, how will we measure those things? How will we design learning to fill those gaps? And then even taking that one step further, how do they like to learn? Because we can craft the best evaluation strategy, have the best learning objectives in the world, but if the learning experience isn't what our learners want or respond to, then it fails at the starting gate. So really taking that holistic viewpoint and then honing in, and then sort of for performance, which is always tricky to measure. We can come back to this, but looking at things like leading indicators too, right? So we might not be able to measure the things straight away, but we might be able to identify things that we can start to look for that tell us we're on track. So that's how I would approach my strategy, is trying to cover it all from top to bottom.
Brilliant, Emma. Thank you very much indeed. We're getting some questions through in the chat. Thank you very much. We'll come to those in a moment. Lanry, let's come to you first of all. This effective evaluation strategy.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for Neil, Neha, and Emma. They have said so many things when it comes to how evaluation strategy should look like. But permit me to say, I will say there are elements that every learning and development professional should look at.
She's also in Babcock, your mass comp. I was asking that, did you people ever meet in school?
Somebody is, yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, we're getting somebody's microphone in the background. I'm not quite sure who it is, but we can hear them. We can hear you perfectly well, Lanry. So you carry on.
Okay. Let me proceed. So I was saying there are basic elements that every effective evaluation strategy should contain. Number one, some of my colleagues on the call, they've mentioned them, but I will just reiterate. I will say it must align with the organizational performance goals. Every evaluation strategy should align with organizational performance goals. And secondly, I would say it must be systematic. I think Emma mentioned you need to involve the stakeholders. By involving the stakeholders, you are not just starting to say, this is the intervention I want to provide, this is what I want to do. Engaging the stakeholders will mean you actually know exactly what the business challenges are. And again, I will also say an effective evaluation strategy should contain methods that we will use to analyze and report the data. All of these should be ascertained at the beginning before the learning takes place. So looking at elements, I will go ahead and set a typical example of what I mean by all of these. For instance, like I said, currently I work in the banking industry in Nigeria, and I've been in the insurance industry. Because of data, I may not be able to speak specifically because I've been across different organizations. Let me just speak from one of the organizations that I've worked. What we discovered that one of our products was not selling, and it's actually one of the best products in town. So what we discovered that what was the issue? Several engagements, several meetings with business leaders, with regional managers to ascertain why are our products, this particular products, not selling the way it should sell. So we discovered that there was a knowledge gap. Some of our sales reps do not have the capacity to drive the kind of engagement with their customers. So we came up with a certain intervention to say, okay, let's roll it this particular intervention to ensure every salesperson in the organization go through what we call something like a deep dive into product knowledge. So not just, oh, you must know this. You must have, before you can sell, you must have the kind of knowledge that even the product designers have before you start selling. And could you believe me that after 6 months, we came back and checked the data that we got before that intervention. It was a tremendous change. It was a tremendous improvement. So aligning the goals, coming up with a systematic and comprehensive method of analysis to ascertain what has been done. It must involve the stakeholders, and as well, how the data will be reported matters. And that's why I want to encourage all professionals that it is not just about ascertaining what's the ROI, but we must be systematic in the way we want to approach evaluation. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you very much indeed. So just summing up your answers, the question is, what does an effective evaluation strategy look like? So from your answers, I'm getting it's the we've got to have the end in mind. So it has to be focused on the business performance. We have to know what that is before we start. That's the first thing. It's about our stakeholders and the relationships we have with our stakeholders and how we build those and develop those early on. It's about how we're going to report it. So what data we're going to use, how we're going to use that data, and how we're going to show that data. And it's having absolute clarity and agreement so that everybody knows what we're working towards.
What's this?
Sound fair?
Absolutely. And I like how Olanma has put it in the chat there, saying, is it okay to say that learning evaluation initiatives can be derived from learning objectives? There has to be a direct correlation. So,
entirely.
Yeah.
Entirely. I don't like learning objectives. I find learning objectives, what we tend to do is we put learning objectives into learning and we meet them and we tick and we go, yeah, we met the learning objectives. They don't relate to the performance objectives in any way, shape or form. But we sit here in L&D and go, well, we did our job, so it was somebody else's fault. We hit the learning objectives, but the learning objectives have to be absolutely embedded within the performance objectives. And this is why I think looking at the questions that have come through, I'm loving the questions. I'm going to combine Artie and Wumi's questions together because I think it's a really
Andrew, can I take a response to that question?
Yeah, please do.
Let me quickly respond, or let me say react to that question. Definitely, your evaluation should definitely be derived from the objective. And from the books, this is more academic. Objective should be in 3 forms. Number 1, it must be ultimate objective, intermediate objective, and immediate objective. What do I mean by these 3 categories? The particular deficiency that the organization wants to eliminate or overcome is the ultimate objective, and that should come first. Talking about the immediate objective has to do with the kind of behavior that we want to change. That's to be able to attain the kind of ultimate objective that we want. Then the immediate objective will speak to the new knowledge, the skills, the attitudes that employees must acquire to ensure that the behavior change that we want to see, which is the intermediate objective, and ultimately reach the ultimate objective that the organization wants. So in a nutshell, you must ascertain what is the ultimate objective, the intermediate objective, and immediate objective, while we want to come up with an effective evaluation strategy. Thank you.
Okay, I get where you're coming from. I'm happy to have an argument about it, but we won't go to that. I've had a long conversation with people. I'm writing a book on proving impact right at the moment, and it's an interesting conversation going on around this. I want to come back to that question. Let's have a look. Artie and Wumi. So they're both asking the same kind of question. How do you attribute the business outcome to L&D efforts when you know there's other factors? But how can we ensure that the result is exclusively due to learning initiatives? I can see that there's an interesting conversation going on in there. Neha, let me come to you first on this one, if this is okay. How can you be sure that it's related to the learning activity and not something else, which is why the performance is improved?
Training, learning and development is in a tricky situation, right? In this case, because it's like marketing. You can do all the advertising possible. You can talk, you can have promos, you can have television, digital media, no matter what, and you can still not pin down a customer acquisition to marketing efforts. And same thing might happen in learning and development as well. I think one way to combat that, or not really combat, to be able to establish that the impact has been because of learning initiatives or your training efforts is what a couple of people already said in the chat. I like how Karen mentioned control group, and Neil also, I think you mentioned doing a pilot. So doing a test like that, an experiment with a smaller group in a controlled environment, that can help you establish the cause and effect between your efforts and the outcomes that you're seeing. And those outcomes may not be directly in an ROI kind of a situation. So often people think that the Kirkpatrick model is the holy grail of evaluating what your training looks like. But I also like the learning transfer evaluation model, LTEM, I think it's called. And I like that model as well, because it has 8 stages to it. So of course it measures the basic 4 or 5 things which we do, which is how many people are attending, the butts in the seat kind of a thing, then how engaged people are, the learning evaluation to see how much of knowledge that people remember, the facts, and also the skills. But then it takes it one step ahead on how people are using that knowledge that they have just acquired to take a decision. Then the next level is using that decision-making power or that new knowledge to complete a task, and to what competence level. And then transfer of it to the real work life, where your boss is probably breathing down your neck because there is some fire in the office, or because you have lots of projects going on. So how do you take that to your real life situation and make it work? And what impact does that have on things like your team's morale, or how people are responding to your leadership, or how your clients are responding to the way the projects are getting delivered? I think those things are great to measure as you do this pilot, and not just strive for directly the results or the ROI level of learning evaluation.
Awesome. Thank you, Neha. Any thoughts from anybody else in relation to this question? Emma, Neil, looking at you in the first instance.
If I may indulge you in a little story, if we've got the time.
We love stories. Stories are how we remember things. So please, stories are good.
So I worked with a customer a couple of years ago, and they simultaneously rolled out a set of learning, a program of learning, and had changed the way people fundamentally worked. Okay, so they did 2 things at once. They ran the 2 things at the same time, and at the end of it, the L&D team said, "Look, everybody's performance has improved." And I was asked to come in and say, "Can you unpick this and see if this is true or not?" And this is why I go back to pilot groups. What we found was that actually the performance was not changed based on the learning that happened. It was changed because people were given a new set of tools that were simplified and were easier to use. This allowed them to implement the learning they should have done the first time they started the job, because the work was easier. Yeah. So what you've got is these 2 stories happening simultaneously that were correlated. Yeah, they weren't causated. So I came in and not hugely popular said, well, actually, this investment hasn't done what you said. It's just the way of working. So the thing about creating, if I can call it a static environment, does allow you to create a hypothesis, which then allows you to create your learning objectives, but then which you can then go, if this learning works, this is the performance change we should see. And whether or not you see that, and then you can play that back to the business, to a simple story. I use a really simplified version of the hero's journey. It's a narrative model, and I play it back. And once you've done that as part of your evaluation, the business can then make a decision about, is this something we want to pursue further because it's been really successful? Yes. Actually, does the L&D team want to go back and change elements A, D, and F? Yep, and then see what change that makes. Or actually, we're not going to roll this out because actually we just need to make a change of a way of working. I think if you can bear that in mind as you start out the design, it will help you create an effective evaluation model. And it also helps the business understand the work that L&D needs to do and what else can affect its outputs as well, so that you can claim the things that you can claim, but you can also give other people the accolades that they get for helping build up L&D and getting the results that you wanted.
I've had exactly the same experience, Neil. Thank you very much. I had exactly the same experience. I went on a training course. I got very little from it. In fact, I got nothing from it. What I did get was a conversation with somebody at a break who went, "Oh, you work doing X, Y, Z. You want to try doing this?" And I went back and took on board all the things they'd said, just in a tea time conversation. That wasn't with the trainer, that was with another participant. So I got really practical activity. So I go back and I start performing better, and everyone goes, "Well, that course must be really good." It was nothing to do with the course. It was nothing to do with the content. It was a happenstance conversation between me and somebody else at a tea break. That's
some people might call it peer-to-peer learning, Andrew.
Exactly. It is peer-to-peer. And what we do is we then say that's the course that's created that, but it's not the course. It just happened to be that conversation. And that problem with causation and correlation, we fall down so many times. I think you're 100% right there.
I think that comes back down to needs analysis though also, right? So a big part of needs analysis, in my process is talking to learners, looking at, okay, well, who is if it's task-based, performance-based work, who is doing this really well right now, who is not doing this so well right now, and how are those people getting by? So are they leaning on another person maybe for support? Do they have a little scrap of paper, a little job aid that they're working on? And as much as you can find that out up front, it's gonna help reveal some of this. And then kind of on the flip side of that, what are the barriers, right? So what are the barriers to learning? Sometimes it's mindsets, attitudes. They've been through it, stinky training before. And like, oh, I don't want to go through this again. And they're kind of going in with the wrong mindset. And then also, it could be things like systems, tools, processes. We've all been to training, to give a slightly different example, where you go, you're fired up, you can't wait to come back to the workplace and apply it. And then there's barriers left, right, and centre. You don't have the system, the tools, the people support you. Anyway, that's my own little.
I think you're absolutely spot on, Emma. There's a whole piece that I could go into, but I'm not going to because it's not my panel. It's you're the panel. There's a whole thing I could go into. I'm looking at the time, 12:35. We've probably got about 10 minutes or so left, I think, haven't we? Take up to 1:45. I've got a question here, which I think probably encompasses some of the stuff that we're talking about and covers around the whole piece of it, which is we're talking about relationships, we're talking about systems, we're talking about people and so on. I'm going to ask the question, how would you introduce a culture of evaluation into the workplace? So how would you change that perception of the L&D function as being more evaluative, as being less than just doing courses, but actually doing the evaluation piece? How would you approach that?
All right.
Question. Go ahead.
Lanry, let's come to you.
Andrew, can I?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Do.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for the wonderful conversation this morning on the call. I will say, first of all, the first thing that needs to be done is to build a case for evaluation. In every organization, professionals, HR professionals, L&D professionals need to drive the culture of not just learning culture, but the culture of learning evaluation, evaluating initiatives and building a case for it. We mean learning intervention, we need to drive performance. I cannot over-reiterate organizational performance. When that case is built and is presented, all stakeholders now understand. For instance, I worked in an organization that was nothing like evaluation framework. So when I came and I said, this is what we want to do, it looks strange. So I had to use like 3-4 months, start engaging line manager to say, this is what we needed to do. Then again, another way to build a culture of learning evaluation is by stop measuring vanity metrics. Learning and development professional, HR professional need to stop measuring vanity metrics and concentrate more on business metrics. Business metrics in the sense that at the end of the financial year, what's our objective? We want to turn in $20 billion per annum. Have we been able to achieve this? If that is what is the conversation that is in the room, it will be easier to drive the culture of learning evaluation. Let me stop it so that my other colleagues can make additional contributions.
Awesome. I agree with you 100% on vanity metrics. My bosses don't care. I mean, I'm independent when I worked in organizations. My bosses don't care that 4.7 out of 5 was the average score for the happiness of people in the room. They don't care. They want to know that people can do the job better.
Can I push back on that? Can I push that back on that, Andrew, slightly?
Please do.
So I'm reminded of a time I was working in a business and we were running a sales training program, the perennial sales training program. The MD cared about EBITDA at the end of the day. He wanted to know that this program would generate revenue. The sales director, his biggest driver was how much people enjoyed it. He wanted to know that his people had enjoyed it. And so part of my role in introducing the evaluation of that was, how do we build a story that applies to both my stakeholders in this scenario? So while I think they're not useful in terms of proving that L&D is an essential part of the business because you want the results and the performance and the ROI, it can be a huge motivator to understand what your stakeholders really care about. And if you're introducing a culture of evaluation, I would start with a small program and understand what those people really care about and work out your processes for gathering that data, refining it and presenting it back to those people so that L&D works on its own processes and then can kind of doesn't need to shout about what it's doing. It kind of just becomes BAU and moves in. So.
I second Neil on that one. Seriously, in some settings like retail settings or manufacturing setting where people are doing mundane, boring jobs day in, day out, exactly the same. For them, just getting this opportunity to be in the same room and have some fun, learn a few new things, make new connections can be, I won't really call it a training, but it's a good peer-to-peer learning networking opportunity for them that L&D can bring about, and that really gets people motivated and feel that the organization cares for them, which is difficult at that level to understand.
What I think is interesting, so it's deliberately contentious. I mean, I make sweeping statements. That's my job. I make sweeping statements and people argue with me. This is fine. What I think both of you have proved, though, is it's about that culture. So what you've got is we're talking about the culture of evaluation in the workplace. Now, if you've got a manager and for them the culture is about their people having a good time, then absolutely you nail that. Most organizations I've worked with don't care. That's the problem. So if someone cares about their employees, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Neil, but if you've got a manager who wants their employees to have a good time, absolutely. Well, then you find that as a metric, because it's not a vanity metric for us, it's a vanity metric for the manager. The manager can then say, well, you all went on this thing and had a good time. Yeah, why are you not performing? It's all for them.
Yeah, and in that case, the idea is that if you are telling me that this works, but you're still not performing, then it comes back to the manager being responsible for it.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be an either or. I think we should be able to do both. That's the dream, right? So something that affects performance and they're having a good time while doing it, and that's all again part of your needs analysis. What do we need to do? How do we need to do it? How do they like to?
Awesome. There is another question that popped up in the chat from Cam, which I think is a really interesting one, which is it's slightly tied into the evaluation piece. what do you do when a training initiative isn't going to solve the problem, but the client insists on it proceeding? Which I think is a really interesting one, because how do you evaluate something which you know isn't going to be the right solution? I think there's an interesting one there in terms of culture. Has anybody got any thoughts on that one before we close down? What do we do if we know that a training thing isn't going to make any difference?
I could take a stab at it. I was reading it, and then I saw somebody also comment on it saying customer is always right. Well, I don't completely agree with it, but the customer need is always right is how I would put it, because the need is real. Training might not be the solution, but the need is always real. And as an example for that, I think it relates very well with the story that Larne talked about, the product trainings that he did, is from a supermarket chain that I used to work with. And they had one of the biggest KPIs as customer satisfaction rating from the store. And there was one store which was suffering on this rating. It was very low as compared to the other supermarkets in the same chain. And we read through the feedback and evaluations and the qualitative things that we had covered, and we realized that it wasn't a problem of customers, the staff being rude, or the products being bad, or anything like that. It was just that the complaint was people who worked in the store did not know enough about the products. So it was a product knowledge problem. But and then, of course, the business head was very adamant. It has to be a training. Bring people back to the classroom, show them pictures of all the products we sell, tell them what each product is for. But then you all have been to a supermarket. You know how difficult it is to know all the products in a supermarket. Every day there's a new breakfast cereal or a new kind of shampoo popping up. So it's absolutely impossible to stay abreast with what's happening on the storefront. So product knowledge training, I knew was not the solution, but there was a lot of insistence. So I went back to the other stakeholder, which I hadn't talked to, which was the actual store staff. And I asked them, hey, what's happening? And what I realized was that store staff was, the store was in a very affluent area in Delhi where lots of international people lived, rich people lived, they were highly educated, and they wanted exotic fruits and international produce, etc. Whereas these people who worked there, they all came from a poor background. They were not very highly educated. They struggled with English, and they would never understand why you need a different conditioner for colored hair, for example. They knew shampoos, but colored hair, different conditioner, they were like, we don't care, we don't know, and we don't understand. So once we understood that, we realized that's where we needed to focus on. So we created a game around it, we gamified the whole thing, and we created a treasure hunt inside the store. So my training coordinator and I started going to the store as a surprise visit in the morning stand-up meetings. They used to have a morning stand-up every year. That's a retail practice. And give them a list of 10 products. And there was a prize at the end of it. So anybody who would bring all these 10 products accurately would get a cold coffee with us. So it was a very cheap prize. And most people did not get it right. Okay, these 10 products were not simple products like bring me a sanitary napkin. It would be sanitary napkin from so-and-so company with wings and extra heavy flow, etc. So very specific products that we were asking them to bring. And initially, nobody won the prize. But slowly, when it generated a lot of interest, people started asking the merchandisers. As soon as a new product hit the store, they would go and ask the merchandiser, hey, we see a new shampoo. What does it do? Tell us. Neha will come any day and we'll have a treasure hunt and we can get the prize. So with that excitement, they kind of took charge of what they wanted to learn. And that yielded a really good results for us in terms of both product knowledge and customer satisfaction from that store. So even though the customers, the stakeholder came to us saying, give them training on product knowledge, was not right in saying they needed training, but they definitely needed some intervention for them to know more about the products that we were selling. So the need was right, and that's what we tackled instead of the demand that they were making.
Awesome. Thank you, Neha.
Was
that you, Neil?
Yeah, sorry. There was a pause, so I thought I'd jump in. I think if there's an opportunity to offer something cheaper and more effective, so rather than saying, oh, you've told me you need something, don't say you don't need it, but say, here's a way of which you could change the way you work. Right, so I'll give an example. A sales team, we've got a lot of sales examples today for some reason. And there was a sales manager who wanted everyone to fill in Scotsman on Salesforce. It's a way of working out your sales opportunities. and people weren't doing it. So we said, could you run, I want everyone in the sales teams, 120 people, to go through this training on Scotsman so that they know to fill it in on Salesforce. And I said, okay, well, it's going to take 120 hours, which works out at this, da-da, and da-da. You know, oh, that's quite a lot. I said, okay, you know, you could just make them mandatory fields. And he goes, oh, right, okay, yeah, we could do that. And so what we did was we made sure that people knew the change was coming, that if they wanted to sign up to something, they could have come and join a session about how Scotsman's work and what fields were changing. And that reduced the need from this, you know, big piece that was going to take up a lot of people's time to adding a tick box. And all of a sudden they had an option that was much more attractive to them that still met the need in the first place.
Awesome. We did something similar, Neil, with people wanted training on managing sickness absence in the organisation, and we pinned down, identified the problem was is people couldn't work out how to log into the system in order to be able to put the sickness through. So all we did is we just took half a dozen screenshots, stitched them together as a GIF, and then sent that out to everybody. And amazingly, all of a sudden, the sickness levels went through the roof. And my manager was going, "Oh God, why the sickness level so bad?" It's because everyone's known how to use the system properly. What you finally got is accurate data. And they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, it's fair enough."
Oh, GIFs are an amazing tool, right? They work from adult learners to my 11-year-old who is totally in love with them. He's so versatile.
They work so well because they're cheap, they're low bandwidth. You can get rid of them and then replace them really quickly. They work so well. I'm a big fan of GIFs, and thank you for putting Elena Satcher's work in the chat, Neha, as well. Big fan of Elena's work. She's been on a podcast I run called Women Talking About Learning, and she's been on there and she knows her stuff. She's definitely a person to be connected with.
She also talks a lot about how to use AI for learning evaluation. And I think if anybody is a technology enthusiast should read that. The qualitative analysis that she does, I think, is phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely somebody to connect with. We've got time for one more question, so we have a choice. So if you want to give me a reaction to the people, if you would like to hear the question that I've got, do a thumbs down. If you would like to hear the question that is in the chat, do a thumbs up. So everybody here, thumbs ups or thumbs down? Use the reaction and tell me. We got some thumbs downs. We got a thumb up. We got another thumb up. Another thumb down. There's thumbs up coming up. Okay, so we want the question from the chat. Okay, so let me find the question in the chat, which I think is a really interesting one, which is, I'm going to change it very slightly, Chidi Berry. I'm going to change it very slightly. So it says, what are the different ways organizations or other L&D professionals carry out TNA? Now, I'm interested from an evaluation perspective, what do we have to do in order to be able to find out really what the problem is with an evaluation focus in mind? So I'll come back to our panel, thinking about, evaluation in mind, thinking about we're changing that culture evaluation. What do you need to do differently in terms of your TNA or LNA or training need analysis or learning need analysis or need analysis in general?
Sorry, please. Andrew, could you repeat that question again?
Yeah, so with the evaluation mindset, so we're thinking about evaluation, we're thinking about culture. What do we need to do differently from a learning or a training analysis perspective?
Okay.
I can jump in. I think we need
Emma, let's come to you.
I think we need to stop asking for permission. I see this quite a lot. People think they need to ask permission to do needs analysis and ask permission to do an evaluation strategy. I think we need to, it's very easy for me to say, but we've got to start sweeping that off to one side and just showing up as the expert, right? Showing up as, I know people don't like the word expert either, but showing up as the professional that we are, who's been given this role, and making it part of our standard process. So whether that's, creating processes, infrastructures, tools, communicating that out to your organization, having like a page on your company's website or intranet where you're kind of talking through, here's the process of engaging with us, here's what to expect when you partner with us, here's the kind of questions that we're going to ask, here's the information we want you to bring to us when we have our first meeting. Help educate your organization to work with you, right, rather than try and do it the other way around, I think is a really big step. And then reports, at the end of that sort of needs analysis process, whatever that looks like, it will depend, depending on the size and scale of your company, project, organization. Put it all down afterwards, summarize what you heard. Here's the problem as I understand it. Here's who it affects. Here's the risks of not fixing this. Here's our recommendations. Here's the evaluation strategy. Put it all in, get it signed off, right? And then if there's any changes that happen as you go down the line, you can kind of come back to this and say, no, this is what we agreed on. This is the best practice. So it's about sort of being a bit brave, I think, and showing up and shifting your own mindset as well as those of your organisations.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I call it moving from shopkeepers to engineers.
Yep.
Which is that rather than being the end of the process where we just say build us a course, actually be an engineer and help analyse and design to think in the first place. Who else wants to have a go at this one? Landry?
All right. Hello?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, so I think Emma has done a great, good job by responding to that question. So I will just say, to reiterate some of the things that she has said, I think there was also a question in the chat box in that regard from Shidebe that says what are the different ways organization or rather L&D professionals can carry out their TNA. One of the things that I've done in the time past is not just to rely on the TNA forms that we usually deploy at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, so to speak, is to engage business leader to ascertain what are the business imperatives. And there is this particular, from a business perspective, we use the SWOT analysis. You can as well use the PESO to identify what are your trends, what are your competitors doing. In the next 5 years in the business where you operate, what is going to be involved? What are the challenges that might come up when you look at the political environment your business is operating? What are the changes that are happening when you look at when you talk when you refer to the policy change within the country where the business is domiciled? Those are other areas to look at learning and development and identify the TNA. So, for instance, we operated in a business where things are changing fast. I'll make reference to while I was in the insurance industry where things are changing. Organizations within the country, within the industry, are now making use of AI to look at how policies can be underwritten, claims can be paid, and what have you. And having that mindset, being proactive enough to say in the next 10 years, what is going to be the business directive, not necessarily join the bandwagon to say, oh, this is what is involved, but understand what the business needs are is a critical way of identifying TNA. Permits me to also make reference to some of the conversations that we have had. I like the perspective that Neil is bringing to this, having been a salesperson. But the challenge most learning and development professionals and HR professionals they have is to actually evaluate non-sales roles. So you discover that for sales, it's much easier. But for support functions, people in customer service, in compliance, people that deals with the intangibles, for those in products, those in the retail segment of whatever industry where they operate, it's much easier. But when it comes to behavioral changes, it's actually difficult for most professionals. I mean, learning and development professionals. So having the understanding to say, I think there was also a question, I think Emma and Neil reacted to that to say, you cannot specifically pin it down, but what we should have at the back of the mind is to say, understand what the end looks like. What is the result that we want to achieve look like? And it will eventually help in ascertaining and evaluating the kind of impact that we have made. And I saw Andrew's comment to say we shouldn't actually be calling it evaluation. It should actually be impact. I think I've done several works currently where I'm working in Polaris Bank and in other places to say we are not going to be calling it evaluation. We want to look at the impact assessment, impact measurement of what different interventions, be it behavioral, be it compliance, be it sales intervention that we're bringing up, what does the end look like? What are we going to achieve at the end will help us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, the impact piece is really important for me. I've got a book coming out in a couple of months' time called Proving Impact, and it's all about that, because it is about impact. It's not about evaluation. Neil, Neha, comments on this one?
If I was going to, if you're not already, something I'd add into your LNA. I wouldn't call it a TNA one, because I think it gives the wrong idea. Because, like we said, training's not always the answer. The learning analysis is, if you don't know about it, go and take a look at the McKinsey 7S model and see how that can apply to you understanding what else in the organization is going to block your people from performing before you set out on designing any learning. And if the business isn't going to make the acceptable changes, because it can't always, you need either to design for the blockers, or at least make them aware that these are going to have an impact on how people might apply the learning back on the job, or the observation of the behavioural change that you might see. And I take stakeholders through that as part of your findings.
I'm a massive fan of the McKinsey model. I actually fiddled about with it a bit and turned it into a 4S&C model. So strategy, structure, system, skills, and then the C is culture. And you look at those elements, and it's fairly clear that it sits there. We're running out of time. Neha, have you got anything urgent to say about this? Because we're into our last 2 minutes.
I think all three panelists have summed up really, really well. I don't have anything to add. However, I want to address something that's there in the chat. We mentioned AI, and here's a question about it. How do we secure our jobs? And I'm not afraid of L&D people or OD people losing their jobs. I think AI is a blessing for all of us. I think it can take over the administrative stuff, like training needs analysis. There's so much qualitative data that you can just put in AI and get the insights quickly. I think it has taken hours and hours of at least my time. I don't know about you, but when you collect LNA results, just going through all the forms and going through the information to find out what are the main highlights is time taking. So using it like a companion to come up with creative names for your training programs, for example, so they're marketable, to create a whole campaign around it. I think we can use AI in a very, very effective way if we start asking the right question, right? AI, I think, has two things that we need to remember.
Yeah.
One is, of course, the data privacy, because we will all be working with some companies' data. So what do we input there, and privacy of the people involved? And the second is AI can only give us, at least at this point, good answers if we ask them good questions. So getting good at asking the right questions to AI so you can generate information that can be useful for you can be key. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background.
No problem. So, thank you. Massive thank you to our panel. I want everybody who's been in the session to give your reactions. Is it a thumbs up, a thumbs down, a heart, a fire? Is it a round of applause for our people who are in the? Look at this! Look at this! Isn't this lovely? Proper good stuff. Well done, everybody. Brilliant work, everyone. Really do appreciate your work. Brilliant conversation. If people want to connect with you, you'll find all our speakers' details on the eLID website, and links to it have been put into the chat as well. But we are pretty much done. It's 1 o'clock, so it's lunchtime in the UK. I'm going to go and eat something. So nothing else to say except thank you to Emma and to Neil and to Neha and to Landry, and from me, Andrew Jacobs, just thank you, everybody. Delighted you were here, and we'll see you again for the next session. Starts at 2 p.m, I believe. Is that right?
Amazing. Well done. I mean, let's just give it up for the panelists and for Andrew. You thanked everyone but yourself. You've done a great job sharing this session. Let's give him, sound and all those emojis as well. Well done. This is amazing. So like Andrew said, we have all our links for you to connect with us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and all the channels, our website are all there. And there's a